So we are talking episode 3 of HBO's Perry Mason, and as I had mentioned in my review last week, I've been kind of lukewarm on this show, and I had said, hey, I'm going to give it 3 episodes. So I'm going to let you all know what I thought about this 3rd episode, and will I continue to watch this show? We're going to talk about that and much more. In order to gain an advantage over EB and his team, District Attorney Barnes goes public with a shocking new development. Mason and Strickland get unauthorized access to physical evidence with help from Virgil, Mason's contact at the city morgue. Later, Mason attempts to extract information from a withholding Drake, who's wilderly of Holcomb and Ennis watchful eyes. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, review, breakdown of the latest episode of HBO's Perry Mason. We're talking episode 3 tonight, and like I said in my opening there, I'm going to let you all know if I'm still going to watch the show after tonight's episode. But before we dive into the spoiler discussion, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Give this video a thumbs up, helps out the channel tremendously, but I also really appreciate it. And if and when you've seen this latest episode of Perry Mason, let me know where you guys are at with this show. If you're going to be back for next week, what are you thinking about Drake and what he did and giving the information to Perry and everything with the corrupt detectives? Let me know where you guys are at mentally with this show and if you're really invested in this story so far. So as I've been doing the last 3 weeks, I'm going to dive into the spoilers, kind of break down the episode, let you know my thoughts on these particular moments. But I'll say this, episode 2 and 3 have definitely kind of opened my eyes up a little bit more, especially by this 3rd episode. I'm getting a sense more of the tone. The comedy's still not working for me. Certain relationships aren't really as well developed as I think the show is trying to make us think they are, but we'll get into that here. But let's just go over this recap. So we start off with this somewhat of a montage of sorts where we see Barnes, preaching to the media that Emily killed her son Charlie. And, that, she's a whore and this, that, and the other. And we're seeing EB on the reverse side. They're playing to the media, right? They're obviously back in the times, word is bond and everyone's writing down the news. It was just really interesting to see all that play out and how the media is somewhat the same, but also a little bit different in this fictional show. But we see all that kind of play out. And we see that, Barnes is really pushing for Emily to get the death penalty, to get the noose, to take her out due to what they think, or they're pushing on to think that she killed her son. And then we'll kind of talk about Emily in the courtroom scene here in a bit. But before that, we see Sister Alice trying to get, Mason to attend the church. We all know Mason's a very complicated character so far in 3 episodes, and I kind of knew where this conversation was going to go. But we see he's trying to convince him to kind of attend the church and, get closer to God. And we see Perry, of course, his thoughts on religion, and especially coming back from war, that he's really not on the same wavelength with Sister Allison. But I can see that relationship maybe developing as the weeks go by, and maybe him getting more involved in the church and maybe getting a better friendship, a relationship with Sister Alice regarding religion and his past demons and dealing with everything he dealt with at the war. Still haven't gotten much about his daughter or his wife, so there's probably definitely some storylines that's going to be revealed with Perry and Sister Alice, and maybe him confiding to her and telling her his deepest and darkest secrets. So we'll see what comes of that relationship. But we do see EB and Della talking to Emily, kind of coaching her about what to expect moving forward with this trial, and everything with the affair. And we see a really interesting moment where we see the Dobkins having an argument in the middle of this trial after, Matt says to her, you slept with this guy. Did you sleep with him in our bed? Did you sleep with him? I mean, I kind of feel for Matthew a little bit in regards to that. His wife, we still don't know, I guess, the extent of their relationship, if it was sexual, if it was she was just confining to him, but I'm pretty sure it was probably a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but we'll see if we get more of the details of their relationship. But Matthew definitely wrong place and wrong time to be kind of having an argument as your wife, where she's going on trial for murder of your guys' kid. But we get that moment there in a little screamy match. We see Perry notices that George's death, there's something off there, and this is one of those shows where, as the audience, and also quick correction from last week's review. I had mentioned that George shot himself. I knew that he didn't shoot himself, but for whatever reason, it came out that way when I said my review last week. I was very aware that he didn't kill himself. I figured that the detectives had something to do with it, but I do appreciate you all. This is why I do these reviews, to get information from you all as well, and not just me spewing out my thoughts on it, but you guys let me know that George was actually the one that was killed by that detective, Holcomb or Ennis, regarding that they killed him in episode 1, and that was the person that was George. I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but thank you all for notifying me that and correcting me on that part of it. And like I said, this is what this is all about. If I miss something, if I misspeak about something, you guys correct me, and you're polite about it and great about it, so thank you for that. So definitely want to make that correction from last week's comments. But yeah, either way, like I said, George, Perry notices that there's definitely something with the death of George, and like I said, this show is one of those shows where we kind of know more than the characters. We know that, George now was the one that got killed by that detective, and also that he didn't kill himself, and we're kind of just watching the characters catch up to us. I'm hoping that the show kind of shifts more where we're kind of in the dark more. It's still some stuff we don't know, obviously, who killed the child and who's all involved, but where the characters are kind of behind us as an audience, because we know that George didn't do it. We know the detective's guilty. We know what Drake knows, so we're watching Perry and everyone else try to catch up to us. So hopefully that kind of evens out sooner rather than later. But Emily is, this is very interesting in her trial. Like, she's definitely at a low point right now, mentally speaking, because as soon as she goes to trial, she, the judge says, "Are you guilty or innocent?" And the first thing she says is she's guilty. I'm like, what the heck are you doing, Emily? And then 2 seconds later, she says she's not guilty. Either way, we see that trial plays out, or she gets the $25,000 in bail, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, nowadays where you can get loans and all this stuff. But back then, $25,000 might as well be $1 million in today's currency. So definitely a high amount of bail to get her out of jail for temporary reasons. But we see Perry wants to talk to Drake about the report that he made, and we see the cop, kind of the detective, again, I can't remember who's who in regards to Holcomb and Ennis, but we see the crooked detectives keeping an eye on Perry and seeing him follow up with Drake, and we see him, getting information about being at the casino on George's previous job. So we see that these detectives are keeping their eyes on Perry to uncover this, the truth about what really happened. So we see the corrupt detectives kind of, low key, subtly, maybe not so subtly, kind of threaten Drake and his wife. We see the detective go up to him and pay for their peaches and their grocery shopping, and rubs the belly of their unborn child and kind of hints and says, it's always good to have friends, wink, wink, in a subtle, not so subtling way. Definitely a threat by all means. And this is by far, again, I like the actors. All the actors in the show are great, but I'm still not rooting for characters per se, especially Perry Mason. I'm not all the way on board with the portrayal and the characteristics of Perry. I'm finding a hard time to kind of root for this character. It's a lot of stuff that we still don't know about him, but Drake's story has been the most interesting so far. Drake and Sister Alice are the most interesting characters for me, at least, especially the dynamic and the information we get from Drake, especially this scene I'm going to be talking about in a bit here. But before we get there, mentioning Sister Alice, who's, again, another interesting character. She visits Emily at the jail and gives her some encouraging words, and that scene, again, not all the supporting characters are working for me. Like Emily and Matt, I don't know, their acting's okay. It just hasn't really gripped me yet, like in regards to a mother that just lost her child. I still haven't gotten that emotional, impactful type of feelings toward Emily, and especially towards Matt. So I'm hoping that things kind of change with that. But we see that scene play out when she's visiting her in jail, and just when Emily's, I don't know, the woman comes and the women are screaming. That scene was just kind of weird to me. But either way, we see Perry digs into George's previous job, and we see again another particular relationship that's not really the strongest for me, and I'm hoping things either pick up or maybe just kind of go on the back burner. But the whole relationship with Perry and the woman at the farm, we saw from Jump Street the very weird, awkward sex scene with them having, that you guys remember the first scene of the episode, or one of the sex scenes in episode 1. Their relationship just seems kind of weird to me. I don't know if it's a matter of lack of chemistry, lack of backstory, lack of kind of knowing who this woman is, because we really haven't seen her outside of interacting with Perry from that sex scene and them driving in the airplane and all that stuff. So I don't know. The relationship just really isn't working for me. Again, I think it's a matter of just lack of chemistry between those two actors. But as we kind of move forward. EB in the bathroom scene, I'm wondering what you all are thinking, what's going on with EB, he had blood in the sink. I don't know if that's alluding to some sickness. I don't know. Let me know what you all thought about that particular scene. I think there is something underbelly of him being sick maybe, and that's going to come up later on. But Perry, this was a really interesting scene. We see Perry confront Drake, and they get into a little bit of a confrontation, really kind of a one-sided fight. We see, Drake punch him, and as, prior to that, we see, Perry, it's the times, we see him call him the N-word, and then a kind of reversal, we see, Drake says, he points to his police badge, which is, kind of coincidental in the times we're living in now with cops and people using their, their power or the badge for power. But we see him say that, no, actually, you're the N-word in this scenario, and I can just do whatever I want and get away with it, which I thought was an interesting scene, to say the least. But we see the Baggerly fires EB and the crew. We get a moment where Drake knows that, he's... Again, Drake and Sister Alice are probably the most interesting characters to me so far. We see Drake having a moment of kind of, do I tell Perry, what I found? Do I tell the truth about what I found? Or do I kind of just push everything on the rug? His wife kind of alluded to that. She did make a good point. Knowing the times that they're living in, that he is a black man working in the police force, the only black man working in the police force, if I'm not mistaken, or at least in that department in LA. So, it's good to have friends in high places, but morally speaking, this is why I like Drake so far, is because he has that moral compass, and we'll talk about that scene later on. But I like the position they're putting this character in, because it gives him some layers, it gives him some complexity, and gives you some interesting things that he has to go through. Do I sacrifice my moral compass, or do I protect my family and my unborn child? Very interesting stuff that we got with Drake. And like I said, him and Alice are the most interesting characters to me, more so than Perry Mason, if I'm being honest. We see Baggerly and his son talking about, convincing him that his sister or daughter-in-law and Matt's wife is guilty, and we see that Matt's still struggling with that concept. And Baggerly brings up building a new place of faith outside of LA. So we'll see what comes of that, and see if any of the building of this church has anything to do with the death of their child and money and politics, and if Sister Alice is going to have any problems with them creating some new church outside of LA, something to keep an eye out for. We see Emily, a really interesting scene, Emily being pretty much taken advantage of in a closet, being beaten by these detectives to force the truth that she killed her son, which I pretty confident in saying I don't believe she's guilty, but they're trying to force her to do that. And we see that, trying to get a confession out of her. And it was, Della came in the nick of time to get her out of that position. Kind of wrapping up the episode, we see Drake confronting Perry once again, but this time around, he tells him the truth, what he found about George. He gave him the teeth that he found, and he tells Perry, if any of this gets out, I'm going to deny it. But we'll see what comes of that truth that Perry learns from Drake, and if there's any consequences from that. But I thought it was a really interesting scene, because again, I'm loving Drake. I think he's him, like I said, Sister Alice and Drake are the most compelling characters, and especially when they interact with Perry, it elevates Perry to me in my personal opinion. But we see that Perry and his friend, his colleague, I can't think of his character's name right now. Let me know in the comments. They go to to George's body, and like I said, we're catching up. The Perry and the crew is catching up to what we already know, and I knew the teeth was going to fit in there perfectly, as you all know as well. So perfect match. And now Perry's starting to put the pieces together that there is some corruption going on with the police department in LA. And then wrapping up the episode, Sister Alice passes out during their whole play thing, and then she says to her mother that God spoke to her, and that she's going to be responsible for resurrecting the baby. So whatever that means, we will see. I think it's more or less just finding out the truth of who killed the baby, more or less, than actually resurrecting this child that is dead, as we see her in the boat as the camera pans away and fades to black. So end of episode 3, kind of final thoughts. Another continuation of last week. Again, there's the supporting characters that I'm just finding more interesting than our main character. Again, I love the actors playing these characters, but I feel like for me personally, I'm rooting more for the actors more so I am the characters, because I like the actors. So hopefully that kind of changes, where I'm more on board with liking these characters and rooting for these characters versus me just being a fan of the actors playing the characters. Again, the Drake and Sister Alice are the most compelling characters for me, especially what we get from Drake, him putting his moral compass above his family, and obviously telling Perry not to tell anyone who I told you this truth, but we'll see what comes of that, because he's really the only one that knows about it. So I think those detectives are going to put 2 and 2 together that he probably told Perry this information. So we'll see what comes of that. We'll also kind of see what happens with this whole church, this new planning of this church that they're going to be building with Baggerly and his son. How long will Emily last in jail before she cracks? What's to come of EB and the whole scene with the blood in the bathroom, as well as learning more about Perry, his kid, his wife, the war, his relationship with this lady at the farm, and then also what else is he going to uncover, finding out about this corruption going on in the LA Police Department. So again, solid episode. I still haven't had an episode that I absolutely love. I'm still not completely on board with this show, but there's enough there for me to continue to watch the show and see what comes of all of this. The mystery of who killed the baby, the mystery of who else is involved, the corruption involved in the police force, what will come of Drake's and his family, all that stuff, EB, all that stuff. There's enough there for me to continue to bite onto this show, continue to watch the show, and hopefully it steals my heart, and I'm going to be a fan of Perry Mason, because so far it's the other people that I like more so than our main character. But that's just my thoughts on this episode. You all let me know what you all thought of this episode. If you're more on board than I am, if you're disengaged with the show, if you're loving the show, who's your favorite character? What are you thinking about what happened in this week's episode, and what do you hope to see in episode 4? So like, share, comment, subscribe. Very fun weekend, guys. I did a watch along for Midsummer. Check that out on the replay. I did a Netflix dark discussion, which was incredible. Such a deep, in-depth conversation with some amazing people this weekend. I did my weekly movie and TV news with David at Flix Talk on his channel. And then this week we got a watch along for Spider-Man, Dr. Sleep. I'm going to be collaborating with David on that. Many more things on Netflix I'm going to be reviewing, as well as TV shows. So more content coming this week. So make sure you hit that notification bell, and make sure you keep an eye on that community tab so you can know what's coming this week. Hope you all are having a great day. Hope you had a great holiday weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next video.